coached, there were always, let's take the year 2004, for example. My father put together the Dagestan national team for combat sambo and in mixed martial arts, which was called no holds barred fighting. There were training camps too. I was 15. It was the winter of 2004. And I was the youngest guy there. The others were, let's say, between 22 and 30, all active world champions. At that time, I was like 14, 15 years old. I wrestled with them, grappled, was in this uncomfortable environment for myself, where we always had the rule that the youngest has to do everything and he is always wrong. And I had to deal with that.
Yeah.
Especially in the gym. They throw you, hit you again and again. You have to show up morning and evening, day after day. This place hardens you. They say how the steel was tempered. Steel isn't tempered for nothing. How many times do you have to strike the steel before it becomes a sword? That doesn't just happen by itself.
Did you believe in yourself then?
Some of the guys who were at those camps back then, they're grown men now. Even then, they were older than me by 10, 12, maybe 15 years. And they always used to say, Khabib, we honestly thought you were going to become some kind of scholar or scientist. Because my father was always making me read and write, read and write. I would copy out entire books by hand. There was always this control. It wasn't like he'd say, Khabib, go do this. And you could just walk away and not do it. When he said, go do it, you did it. My father never forgot anything. He had a phenomenal memory. He'd be like, did you do it? And everything he told you, he remembered. He just did.
He checked you.
He was like, come here. And he'd check. I knew it wasn't something I could get away with. So, since childhood, I was lucky that my father always kept me close. And I found myself in this environment among fighters who at that time, where I don't know, they just didn't compete in America and Europe back then, but in the post-Soviet space, they were the best at that time. And it helped me a lot to become mentally strong.
Tell me more about your father. You've read a lot. You didn't just fight. You were well-rounded, and you told several stories about this. There's a book. What is it called? Countries and Peoples.
Yes, from my childhood.
It is, really?
Yes.
And it went on.
The approach was the same.
Tell that story because I think it's important for the parents listening to us to understand this. You're not just trying to create a champion. You're trying to raise a well-rounded person, a wise person, a person with depth.
Yes, you have to give the right motivation to kids with proper communication. My father was very good at this. I now realize, interacting with my own kids, how wise he was and how deeply he understood this. Because when a child is 8, 10 years old and when they are just beginning to form as a person, it is important to have the right approach. I now understand how far-sighted my father's approach was. First, he tried not to give me anything for free. Only sometimes I could get something for free, for example, before a holiday, like Eid al-Fitr or before school started. Father would give money, I'd go buy clothes at the market for back to school, that kind of thing, And at other times, he always told me, well, if you want it, you need to earn it. You want me to give you money just like that? There would be some work around the house and so on that I had to do. And I knew that encouragement would always be there. My father always had this kind of approach. He set a very strong personal example, very strong. And I really learned a lot from him. Took a lot. And then, as you mentioned, there was the book Countries and Peoples. Someone gave it to him as a gift. My father read through it and he realized that it was perfect for me. For a child who was 10, 11, maybe 12 at the time. That book was part of my life for about 2 or 3 years, something like that.
It was about 193 countries. Their geography, history, all the details.
For each country, it describes its geographical location. which countries it bordered, its major rivers, mountains, cities, history, economy, finances. Just brief information about every country. My father said, "You'll tell me about each country and I'll give you money for it." And I thought, all right. I knew this was like my own little capital, just sitting there waiting for me. All I had to do was come, take that book, read it, understand it. Then my father would take the book and say, "Now, tell me what you read." And he would check. He would look through it. The countries were arranged alphabetically. A for Andorra, Angola, and so on. B for Belgium, Brazil, and so on. Everything went in alphabetical order. I started from A and read them all, straight to the very end. Like every single time, when I needed the money, I did that. And for example, I go over the first 40 countries, he'd check a box, and then I continued. That's how my father would test me. Let's just say that my knowledge of geography comes from back then.
Did you realize how big the world was?
No,
As a child, you don't understand.
at that time I didn't understand, but since then I've had this desire to travel. I really wanted to travel, visit different countries, see wonders of the world, the Colosseum, the pyramids. But all of this is from childhood, from what I read and wrote. It wasn't just about reading, I also had to rewrite it. I had to write it down. I always wrote down what I read. And actually, this is very good advice for parents, you know. They can use this with their children too. They can tell them to sit down and copy books by hand. First of all, eyesight improves, reading improves, writing, how you write improves, your handwriting, and it stays with you when you read and write. It really develops a child. Not only I believe that, I actually do advise parents to motivate their kids this way. You can simply create some kind of challenge that children benefit from and reward them for it after it is done. This really helps develop a child's mind.
I actually saw advice from the great writers who said that they remembered doing the same thing when they were young. When they first started writing, they just simply copied other legendary writers. You read their work and then you type it out yourself. And you start absorbing that style into your bloodstream.
Well, it needs to be done in childhood.
Sure.
When the child is ready to learn and his mind is open, let's say, as a metaphor, when his table is clean, not occupied with clutter, then, as a father, you can help them place all the right things on the table in their proper place. Let's say, put the food in one place, flowers in another, something like that. It is important. That's why I believe I was very lucky. My father did the right thing. He provided me with the right kind of information. And I learned a lot just from being around him. I learned so much just from his presence. He was there at home, and then we also went to competitions. He was always there at trainings and at camps, so I absorbed a lot from him. And it was interesting for me too. Of course, when you're a teenager, sometimes you're tired, sometimes you want to break free. All of that was there. But my father had the right approach. He influenced me a lot and in the right way.
And there's the physical component too of hard work. There's a story you told about the time he made you dig a big hole just because it was difficult. There's wisdom in that. That you just need to work. You need to stay busy all the time.
These were training camps from 2005 to 2007. In the summer, we went to the mountains. There was a children's camp there, an old Soviet-style pioneer camp, where we stayed doing our runs in the forest. Together, we built a small training area there with a rope, a punching bag, a pull-up bar. We did sprints there. We pulled resistance bands. After running in the mountains, we would come back and work there. There were almost no mats. We built the base ourselves. It had a dining room on the first floor and an attic space where we slept. We would come downstairs, eat, go outside, train in that little sports area, then run in the forest. It was somewhere around 1200 meters above sea level, a conifer forest. We spent the whole summer there. There we'd train in the morning, then there was nothing to do all day. And in the evening we had training sessions again. But during the day, so we wouldn't be busy with unnecessary things, my father sometimes gave us work. And we'd ask, why are we digging this pit? He'd say, well, people used to use it like a refrigerator. When you dig 2 or 3 meters down, it is cold inside. You can put milk there, cheese, things like that, so the food does not go bad. And we were like, okay, but do we really need these refrigerators every day? So in that sense, this was his approach back then. He always had this kind of unique approach.
Well, what's the philosophy here? That you got to be busy all the time, working hard, doing something difficult?
Yes, it's very dangerous to give a child free time in adolescence. They should always be busy, learning new information, improving, acquiring new skills. A person should always be busy. When you're 16, well, what can be on your mind? You should constantly develop and improve. And by this time, you should already, I believe, have decided what you want to become. You should already be investing in what you want to turn into.
By the way, you had several very good conversations with Nurlan, with Adam, which I highly recommend. In one of them, your brother Abu Bakr told a story that when you were young, there were several street fights, maybe many, I don't know. He said he was the one who got you into it. You were kind of bigger, and he needed protection at that time. You were that protection. Can you tell us these stories? How often did you fight on the streets of Dagestan?
Well, let's start with the fact that I never bullied anyone. Never. Although I physically could bully, yes, let's say I had the capability. I wasn't the kind of person who started the fights.
You didn't start?
I didn't. Well,
Tried to finish?
well, maybe there were some moments, but mostly no. Mostly I didn't start. Abu Bakr, sure, he was like that. In my circle, I had some guys who were a little bit like that.
He said that he's a bit of...
He was a troublemaker.
Yes.
He was a troublemaker. And because of him, I got into trouble many times. When you're, let's say, 14, 15 years old, and your brother is fighting, you don't really ask who's right or who's wrong. You just go in, you start to, as we say, you interfere. You just have to go in, right? But when you're older, more conscious, when you're 20, 25, or 30 years old, this is when you really start telling him, you know, Abu Bakr, I think you're wrong here. Yes, we'll finish this right now. But in the future, I wouldn't want you to get involved because I think it's wrong, right? Well, as kids, we just didn't ask. We just went right in. When we moved to Makachkala in the 1999, let's say the end of 1999, so we were many brothers, more than 10 of us. We lived in one house. Some were in school, some in college, some in university. But we all had one routine. We trained in the morning, then went to school. We'd come home, rest, do homework, then train in the evening, come home, and rest. Without mothers, just by ourselves. Father gathered everyone. He took in close friends and family, his nephews, cousins, relatives, those who didn't have a father, and so on. He took them in. And we all lived in one house. We cooked, cleaned, did laundry all by ourselves. It was like, well, some kind of army life, you know? And when the brothers had some problems, let's say misunderstandings, we didn't go easy on those guys. And even those who lived around there near that house, in that district, in the settlement, everyone knew that there were lots of brothers living there. So they had to be careful. And we had a football field there. It was right in front of the house. And everyone who came to play there, we constantly had fights there, misunderstandings. There were older brothers. They were always watching us, keeping us from trouble. Don't do this, don't do that, watch your mouth. But we had our own little group. The age difference between us was maybe 2, 3 years. There were 5 or 6 of us. We'd always go outside and play football. If our team was losing, then the game would just turn into a whole different sport. And that's how we were growing up. We spent 6, 7 years there, almost 10 years. We were living together, growing, training. A lot has happened over that time. But I was never, well, maybe just a couple of times, okay? Mostly, I was never the initiator of fights, with some exceptions. I just remember since childhood, my father always told me, you don't need to use force on the street. My father looked at all of this in a completely different way.
What is your understanding of the difference between the street fight and sports?
There is a very big difference. I saw many fights where if you put those same guys into sparring, in wrestling, MMA, or combat sambo, one guy could beat the other very easily, but the street is completely different. There are no rules, no referees, no points. You just fight there. And it's totally different. I can say I actually had a major turning point in my life. Let's say the one that, in terms of psychology, really changed my whole attitude towards MMA. Back in 2002, 2003, my father kept me in wrestling. He trained MMA, combat sambo, but wanted me to stay in wrestling. My cousin, who was older than me by a couple of months, he was training with my father. His freestyle wrestling was weak, so my father sent him to me, to the place where I was training. It was called the School of Higher Sports Mastery. The local guys from the city know this place. He came to practice and got into it with a guy in our gym who was heavier, maybe 1 class heavier. This guy was the best in his weight, winning Dagestan and the city too. So they got into a conflict. They were arguing. My brother had just joined. He was new to our freestyle wrestling gym, right? But I knew the other guy well. They paired up and they got into it. Well, that's my brother, right? So the guy goes, let's meet up after. And they agreed, as we say, to step outside after the training. I remember it was raining heavily, a real downpour. The guy brought his brother. I came with mine. We went outside and they started fighting, 1-on-1. I remember he shot in, lifted, and took him down. Abdurrahman, my brother, threw up a triangle and he choked him out. When we went out, I was thinking Abdurrahman will lose to this guy. I even visualized it happening. The whole thing, like this guy beats him and then I start fighting. Well, I'm not going there for my brother to lose. In my head, I was getting into a fight, but he threw him locked up in a triangle. For the first time, I saw with my own eyes how someone chokes another person with a triangle and they lose consciousness. They fought, he put him to sleep. We had to pull them apart, me and other guys. Fight's over, Abdurrahman won. And on the way home, I'm like, Abdurrahman, wow, you impressed me. I came home and immediately told my father. I said, that was in 2002 or 3, if I'm not mistaken. I am 14 years old. I said, I'm switching to combat sambo. I said, what Abdurrahman did, the one he choked out, he's not just anyone in the gym. He's one of the best wrestlers, but he couldn't do anything. My father said, you'll go to wrestling, but you'll come to me, I'll teach you, you'll learn techniques here, and so on. But I want you to gain wrestling skills. I started going 3 days to train with my father, 3 days to wrestling. And at that moment, I realized that no matter how strong the wrestler is, lying on the back is where the wrestling normally ends, but MMA only begins there. And I was like, I thought, I need this mixed style. I realized this was for me. I started going to my father's trainings, despite that he didn't let me. He didn't want me to do fighting. I think most people don't know this. My father wanted me to do freestyle wrestling or judo, but in my head, I already had this mixed style. I always wanted to compete. I was already getting tapes to watch. I always wanted to compete where there are no rules, where I could fully use my skills.
Maximum freedom.
Yes, judo, sambo, freestyle, grappling, jiu-jitsu. More people knew jiu-jitsu than grappling. After that, I switched, and from there my journey slowly started, which I had already begun. That's when I started the amateur journey. Then when I started getting good results as an amateur, I realized that I can switch to pro and achieve success.
Sambo.
In combat sambo,
Combat sambo.
I competed in all kinds of sports. Everything that involves wrestling and fighting. I competed everywhere. I competed in freestyle, in judo, in grappling, in combat sambo. I competed in sports sambo, in hand-to-hand combat, in pankration. My father put me in all competitions. He would say, "You have a competition here and another one there. Now you are preparing for this one. You will compete in this weight, under these rules, in this sport." And he was sending me everywhere. He would tell me, "You will need this in the future. The more competition experience you have, the more relaxed and confident you'll feel. It builds up over time." When I was young, I was losing as well. I go to a judo competition, win 2 matches and lose 2 matches. I would ask, "Father, why are you sending me there? This is not my sport." And he'd say, "No, go and compete." So, okay, I went, I cut weight. The next day you come in, you see 50 competitors in your weight class. You let this weight, this competitive energy pass through you, and psychologically you get better each time. You become more relaxed about it. And this moment really affected me. Although then I didn't agree with my father. Back then I thought, why should I compete in other sports? He said, "You can wrestle, right? Well, go wrestle." I was saying, "But judo isn't my sport. It's hard for me there." He says, "Well, you went on 4 times. Look, you won twice, then lost twice. You competed 4 times. You're 15 years old. You're just developing. Do you know how valuable this experience is for you? 4 matches in 1 day. Now, when I'm coaching, I understand the psychological approach, how important it is. I realize now how correctly he prepared me for the big stage. The preparation was already happening then, when I was 15 years old. For example, when I went into the biggest fight in combat sports history, when I fought in 2018 here in Las Vegas. At that point, I was already at my peak, prime time. I was 30 years old. I went through all possible competitions as an amateur and a professional. And you know what? I was ready. This preparation, it started back then when I was 15. It's not like they give you a fight and you prepare for 2 months. Preparation starts long before you even step into the octagon.
So this experience of competitions, which started at 15, it continued, it expanded.
Yeah, of course.
So can you explain what was going on in your head?
I didn't want to lose. I just didn't. It never occurred to me that I could get hurt, that someone could hurt me, that I might break a finger somewhere. I never had that in my head, that I could get hit, that I'd get a scratch, and so on. I don't know if you can call it perfectionism. I didn't want to lose. And to not lose, I knew I needed to compete a lot and improve. Training is one thing, but competing is different. I understood that the more I competed, the more experience I would gain. I had to go through it. It was constantly on my mind. This understanding that I must compete a lot came to me at an early age, since I was 15, 16, 17, 18, and I never stopped thinking about it. So it was always in the back of my mind.
Were you confident that you would win?
In my youth, no.
Were you afraid to lose?
Yeah, in my youth, I wasn't always so sure. I just wasn't. Because I never stood out. Yes, I had a coach for a father, and how How many trainers have kids who compete but aren't successful? And then when I went to the big leagues, I had already fought. I had done 16 professional fights across the post Soviet space. Later, when I was already signed to the UFC, there I already had this feeling. With each fight, I was getting mentally stronger. My mind was becoming more and more solid, like concrete. When I went out there, I knew, yes, these are fights. Yes, you can take a hit. Yes, anything can happen when knees, elbows, fists are flying. When you can get caught in a choke. But I thought if they don't knock me out, how will they beat me? I have 15 minutes. 15 minutes is enough to make a person tired. I'm like, okay, if you wanna stop me, come here. I'll give you that chance. Let's get in the octagon. I had this impatience during fight week. I wanted to go in there and feel my opponent. I just wanted to be inside the cage, for them to close us in, for the referee to say, ready, ready, fight. And here I wanted to grapple with him and feel his strength, his skills, his energy, and for it not to stop. And with any opponent I felt from the beginning, and I didn't actually have superhuman strength, but from the beginning, when I grabbed them in the first minute, and then in the 6th or 7th minute, I could feel them fading. I was, let's say, like squeezing this energy out of them. And I was getting better and better, minute by minute.
Can you break down the technical details of your top pressure? That pressure you put on in wrestling, on the ground, all of it. How does it work? Can you explain the philosophy behind it?
Over the years, I've learned to use my strength properly. There's this sport called Aikido. I don't like it much, but I like their philosophy, where your strength might work against you. I think for a lot of listeners, this is gonna be a brand new sport, but there is this sport called Aikido, and the whole philosophy behind it is using your opponent's force against them. That's what I learned to do. And I have learned to force an opponent into positions where they have to escape wasting their energy. Like when we were sparring yesterday, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted you to feel that energy, that heavy top pressure. We could have just played around. I could have gone easy on you. But I wanted you to feel the real heavy pressure. And of course, please don't think it was a sign of disrespect. It's quite the opposite.
No, it was respect.
I just wanted you to feel that, how exhausting it can be. I think you felt it yourself, that it was a bit different from the kind of grappling you've dealt with before. I'm sure of it.
The only one who's even close to that is, you're the absolute number one. But the only thing is, when I trained with Roger Gracie in a different sport, you get that same feeling with him, like the guy's just insanely heavy.
Pressure. Well, Roger, he's the greatest too. He's the greatest in his own sport. What makes a person unique is his style and his approach to his work. I always approach my craft very professionally, respectfully. I believe that if you're gonna be in this game, in this sport, you have to completely dedicate yourself to it.
But I think you had a deep understanding of how to break an opponent, both physically and psychologically, just looking at your style.
I've always been right there, always fighting for position. That I just always had this thought in my head. My grandfather always told me, a dog that latches onto that one weak spot always wins. It's the same with a fighter. When you're fighting on pure instinct, you feel your opponent's weakness. You know where they're weak, and you have to keep pressing right there. For example, let's say I'm fighting Connor, right? His strengths are his striking, his timing, and his speed. His boxing. Why would I stand and strike with him? What am I supposed to do? I have to put pressure on his weak spot. So, that's what separates the fighters who reach success the highest level of success and become the best of the best. They they know how to find an opponent's weakness and they pressure it relentlessly. So it all comes down to having the right strategy here.
Your fight with Connor, I think, was the biggest fight in UFC history. That's for sure. Well, actually, in all of sports, do you think there will ever be another fight of that magnitude in the UFC? Is it even possible?
Well, let's look at the history here. I mean, our sport is still very young. Say 35 years old, starting from the 90s. Put it this way. Take, for example, the sport most similar to MMA, which is, well, let's say boxing. How old is boxing? 150 years? Like when you think boxing, what pops into your head? Thriller in Manila?
Yeah. Well, I love Mike Tyson a lot too, so.
Well, Tyson had big fights, but Mike Tyson never had that signature rival like Muhammad Ali had in Joe Frazier. Yeah, he just didn't have one. I mean, who do we have? Evander Holyfield? Look, Holyfield Tyson is no Muhammad Ali. Take Ali and Frazier. Thriller in Manila, right? People called it the greatest rivalry. And it still is. In the 20th century, there was nothing that could compare. In the 21st century, the only thing you could compare to it, purely based on the numbers, is Pacquiao and Mayweather. Yes, there was public interest, but there wasn't the energy that there was with Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier.
Yeah, if I can just pause for a second, I'll check on Perplexity. List the biggest boxing fights of all time. It's Ali and Frazier, like you said.
Yeah.
The first, the third.
Well, when he lost. And then the third fight, the Thriller in Manila.
And Foreman, I must say Ali versus Foreman.
Well, Foreman, that was the year, I think, 74, right?
The fight was watched by up to 1 billion people worldwide.
Yeah. It was one of those things. Politics got mixed into it too.
Yeah.
It was actually a very big fight.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Durant, Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns, Hagler versus Hearns.
Well, Hagler and Duran in Montreal.
Yeah.
Sugar Ray Leonard and Duran in Montreal, when they fought, when he admitted after the fight that he lost the mental game and broke down before the fight. But then Sugar Ray beat him later.
Yeah, he came back and won.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it out of everything that stands out, I think you can mention Frazier and Muhammad Ali. And there was also Joe Louis against the German Max Schmeling. Hitler stood behind Schmeling and Roosevelt stood behind Louis. For those who don't know this story, I just watched it recently. It was something incomparable. They were so big. They were two of the most famous athletes of their time. Roosevelt was promoting Joe Louis, you know. At that moment for America, it was like something incredible that a white president was promoting a black world champion. And on the other hand, Hitler stood behind Schmeling.
It was what, 1936, 1938 that
They fought twice?
Twice.
Yeah. They fought 2 times.
This wasn't just a good boxing match, just a good fight. This was politics. Those were nations.
This was politics, this was nations.
Everything.
It all came together.
And it's the same thing with Ali, too. Muhammad Ali with the Vietnam War, all that stuff.
Yes.
And his and even religion is tied into it. Everything here came together.
They simply went beyond sports.
Yeah.
It was the exact same thing when I fought Connor. That fight went beyond our sport. It impacted every sport because athletes of all kinds of different sports, everyone who loves to compete, it didn't matter if it was football, basketball, soccer, or boxing, everyone was following this. And honestly, will there be a fight like that? Well, it's hard for me to say, but I think it'll happen. It'll happen for sure. There will always be champions, there will always be rivalries, but when it'll happen, that's just a matter of time.
So it's not entirely about the athletes, it's about everything combined.
Yeah, it's everything combined. The way he talked, what he stirred up, the lines he crossed, touching on family, religion. And then somehow on one side you had Conor, this really interesting champion who knew how to hype himself up. And on the other side, you had this undefeated somebody from nowhere, from the mountains. You know how it is. It all somehow, all of it just kind of happened naturally. And it wasn't staged. It was real. We had a real rivalry, unlike the way a lot of people now just hype up interest in a fight. But people feel that energy. It doesn't go anywhere. People can tell what's real and what's fake. And because of that, we went beyond our own sport. That's what made this fight so massive.
Well, when you look into your heart back then and now, did you have anger? Did you have hatred for him?
Back then and even now, I'd still keep a cool head. Nothing has changed. When you let your emotions take over, when they're off the charts and you completely lose control, that's a very bad place to be. So you'll tire out faster. You'll fall for any kind of bait and so on. I just knew that I needed to stay calm, composed, to stick to the plan no matter what happened and not go beyond my emotional limits. This is a very, very dangerous moment when you give in to your emotions. You have to control them. Every single detail, every little thing has to be perfectly in place. The second you let it all slip, everything becomes a total mess. So once the fight was finally done, I just let all my emotions out. I had to step right in and prove it, and punish him, and show them I'm better, that I'm better than him, and put a final end to this whole bitter rivalry. When all of that was over,
Your emotions came out.
that's where my emotions just went over the edge. But until the fight was completely finished, starting from training, at the press conferences, at the weigh-ins, everywhere, in front of the media, everywhere, I kept myself completely under control. And I was very good at it. Honestly, looking back, it's been almost 8 years now. Looking back, well, I'm a little surprised. At that point, I was a very emotional guy too. Over these 8 years, a lot has happened in my life. But I'm surprised that I kept it together. And, well, it wasn't easy for me to keep myself within my limits, to keep myself under control like that. But here, again, I'll come back to what I said. I was very lucky. My father called me, at that time I was here 2 months before the fight. His advice helped me out so much because for me it was not just that it mattered. It was actually the most important thing for me back then, just to know my father's reaction, how he was taking everything that was happening, because there was just so much media coverage. So I knew my father was watching. It was important for me to know his take. I'd call and ask, and my father would even tell me things I hadn't even asked him about. He'd bring it up on his own. Because the way it is with us, between me and my father, in our traditions, in our part of the world, in our family for generations, in our village, there's just always this distance with your father. Like when you walk in, there are just so many things you can't let yourself do in front of your father. You have to be sort of like a soldier in front of a general, right? If you can even make that comparison, if a soldier stands at attention like that, then with us, it's even stricter. Even just to give an example here, for instance, imagine you're a father sitting there, right? And your 2-year-old kid walks up to you and wants to play with you. You can't even do that baby talk thing with your own kid.
You don't have that kind of friendship.
It's a friendship, but
It's different, yes.
there's a certain distance that you must keep around your father. You always have to be completely buttoned up.
Yeah.
You have to stand like a soldier in front of your father. You don't let your emotions take over. At that point, just to know what my father thought, who was all the way across the ocean, who couldn't just fly out and be there to support his son and just be there by my side. But for me, since he didn't have a visa, I just had to know exactly what he thought. I didn't care what anyone else thought. I didn't care about the opinions of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions watching this fight. I only ever cared about one person and his take, what he thought and what he'd say to me. But I couldn't call him and say, "Father, what do you think about this?" Well, we never had that.
Well, you had to wait.
I would just call and wait to hear what he'd say. And my father, he knew exactly where to draw the line, because he was in the exact same position with his own father since his own father was still around. And then he had a son too, right? And he understood me, how I felt about him, since his relationship with his own father was the same way. And in that sense, back then, my father really kept me grounded mentally. He even told me something once. Do you know how diamonds are like actually made under great pressure?
Hmm.
He says you're under great pressure and you have a choice. You can break down and give up, or you can get through it all. Properly, clearly, with dignity. Go in, prepare right, make weight, recover, go in, win, and settle it once and for all. And those exact kinds of moments, they deeply impacted me.
So, because of those words, you could cut everything off.
Yeah,
Focus
well,
mentally.
mentally. Like if a million people showed up right there and told me right outside where I was staying at the hotel, right? Like if a million people gathered right under my window and said, hey, we've got your back. And honestly, just one call from my father, it wouldn't even compare. Because that one call from my father, that one piece of advice, his support, his voice, it charged me up way more than absolutely everything else combined.
But I must say, Jose Aldo, who is one of the greatest fighters of all time, and still, Connor was arguably able to psychologically break him.
Yeah,
But with you, it seems like Connor was not able to mentally affect you. Did he manage to get into your head even a little?
no, not at all. I had a clear understanding that physically and mentally I was just way stronger than him. I didn't doubt myself for even 1%. Well, people, they can say whatever they want. He's got a massive fan base too. Maybe they won't agree with that. But the Almighty gave me this unshakable confidence that is just really hard for me to even put into words. And I just deeply believed that I was better than him and that I was stronger than him. And that in this matchup, well, I was supposed to win. I just had this rock solid faith in myself.
Up until that moment, is it fair to say that this was your toughest fight?
Up until that moment,
Correct.
100%. Because fighting's all psychology, you know. It's a mental game. Mentally speaking, that was my toughest fight. At that point, yeah. But a tougher fight came later,
With Gagey,
with Gagey.
there were a lot of factors that made it so tough.
Yes.
So can you explain, you said somewhere that actually, unfortunately, or at least from my perspective, unfortunately, we never got to see your absolute limit. Where you
Not in fights, no. You've never seen my limit in fights.
was the closest to it because of the whole process. Can you explain why it was a tough fight, your last one?
First and foremost, it was because I had lost my father. It was hard to pull myself together. Everything piled up at once. My father was gone. And training without my father, without the person I was doing all of this for, the person I wanted to become champion for, first and foremost to prove to him that I could become the best. And then the training camp itself, physically, I was not in the best shape. I had injury after injury after injury. But mentally speaking, I stayed completely sharp. Well, this is when you got injuries, your mental game can slip a little, or things at home are going bad. All of that impacts a person. 1, 2, 3, 4. All these things affect you. You become, let's say, not sharp. You lose your fire leaves you, your focus leaves you, your head is somewhere else. Even though you are physically there, mentally you are somewhere else. But I always stayed there. I knew it. Nobody had any idea that was going to be my last fight. No one knew about the talk I had with my mother.
But you knew and you were sure.
Well, I knew for myself. This is my last fight. I was never going to step into the cage again. I knew it, and I had to finish it right then and there because putting myself through all of that yet again, it would have just been too hard on me if I got injured and the fight fell through, and putting my mother through all that stress again. I knew that all the anxiety I go through for 3 months leading up to a fight, my mother goes through it too. I understood all of that. I wanted to put an end to it because we'd already had that talk. We already had an agreement. All of that combined, I mean, mentally, it just, I was, I was right on the edge. Like, it was a fine line and I really was on the edge.
And I heard or maybe read somewhere that you said you were already starting to miss it while the fight was still going on.
Yeah, inside the octagon. I knew it would never happen again. I stepped in there and I just took it all in. I was fighting and just every single moment, every single move, I felt it deep down. And in my head, I already knew this was the final run. Everything I'd been doing my entire life, it all came down to this, that competitive rush. I'll never feel that anywhere else. I knew deep down this was my last fight.
What kind of feelings were those?
I've never felt anything like that again. Those feelings could only be experienced right there, on that exact day, that very evening, with that opponent, inside that cage. I've never had them before that night, and never had them since, and I don't think I'll ever be able to feel that way again. I think Buvaisar said that these feelings, standing on the podium, becoming an Olympic champion, you only feel them in that moment when they announce you. You step onto the podium. That's it. They announced you. You won. You live. That's it. You only feel them there. You don't feel them anywhere else. And athletes live for those feelings. They train their whole lives for them.
Do you ever think about that? That in our lives, if we're lucky, we only get maybe 1 or 2 moments like that, at that absolute peak.
Yes, very rarely.